Let's get into doing some real algebra. We're going to start throwing letters into the mix. Now in Unit 1, you learned about order of operations. And for most of you, this was a refresher because it's been a while since you've actually done some math. Unit 2 is one-step equations and inequalities. So you're going to learn how to solve for a variable, usually with one step. You move one thing and then you're going to get the answer. So let's call this. This is Unit 2, Day 1 notes. All right, an equation. It's a mathematical sentence that contains an equal sign. If there is no equal sign, it is not an equation. It is just an expression. Okay? You need an equal sign. Equal equation, they both have EQU. So what does it mean to solve an equation? It means to get the variable isolated, or you could say on one side, on one side of the equal sign. It doesn't matter which side. You're going to solve the problem whether you have your x on the left side or your x on the right side. Remember that. Okay, then to find the value or values of the variable, that makes the equation work. If the answer is 3, you want to find 3 because 2 will not make it work. You'll understand as soon as we get into it. So what's the opposite operation of subtraction? Very good. It's addition, because I'm sure everybody shouted it out. And what's the opposite of addition? Wait for it. Exactly, it's subtraction. You guys are so smart. So let's read this statement. To solve an equation involving addition or subtraction, you undo the addition or subtraction by doing the opposite. Alrighty? So let's talk about this. Oh, and here's a note I forgot to write down. And I'm going to write this in red. You must do the same operation on both sides. You cannot subtract something from one side and not do it from the other. Algebra is balance, all right? The equal sign is the tip of the scale. And you've got your things on each side that are in balance. So if you add something to one side, you must add something to the other side. If you take away something from one side, you must take away something from the other. They must balance. So let's jump into this. Topic A, you're going to solve for the variable. 9 equals x plus 7. Okay, we are going to do this algebraically, even though many of you probably already did it in your head. I want to get the variable on one side of the equal sign. Now, I don't have to move my x. It's already on one side. I have to move the 7. Move the 7. Now, the 7 is positive. See, it says adding, plus 7. Alrighty? The opposite of addition is subtraction, so we are going to subtract 7 from both sides. Now, something we teach you later, but I'm going to teach you this earlier, is the T. You make a line from the equal sign down, doesn't matter how far you go. That helps you keep straight what things are on which side of the equal sign. I tend to slant my writing and I kind of go right. And so it's possible I'll make a math error because I don't have things lined up properly. So now they're lined up properly. All right, what is 9 minus 7? It is 2. We write the equal sign. We keep the x because we didn't do anything with the x. And 7 minus 7 is 0. Now we never really write plus 0, so your final answer, 2 equals x. You do not have to switch things around so it says x equals 2. That is not necessary. In fact, I really don't want you to do that. because it'll mess with your head when you do inequalities. If the variable's on the right, leave it on the right. It's perfectly happy there. Let's do the next one. I'm going to draw my t. All right, w minus 4 equals 8. Again, I know you already did this in your head, but let's practice the algebra. The w is on the left side of the equal sign. We're going to leave it there. We don't need to do anything with it. But we need to move the 4. To move the 4, we do the opposite. Subtract minus 4 means you add 4 to both sides. Why? That becomes 0. So you have w minus 0 equals 12. W equals 12. Now we chose these very simple problems you can do in your head because we know you can do them mentally, but by practicing the algebraic skill with something that's easy, you're going to get much better and more confident when we have to do the more complicated problems. So there's additive property. We call it additive because you're adding something to both sides. Even when you're subtracting, it's adding a negative, and we'll get into that later. All right, let's do decimals. Now, oh, decimals, that's interesting. Oh, they look complicated. Guess what? It's the same process. It doesn't matter whether you're messing with decimals or whole numbers. The process is the same. You are going to get so sick of hearing me say that this year, but I will. The process is the same. No matter how long and complicated your algebra problem is, the process is the same. All right, I'm going to draw my t. The w's on one side. I'm going to leave it alone. We have plus 2.6, which means we subtract 2.6 from both sides. Now, if you notice, you've got 8.13, which is 2 decimal places. 2.6 is 1. Help your brain. Make a 2.60. It doesn't change the value, but it does make it easier on your brain. All righty. That cancels out because that's 0. W plus 0 equals, I'm going to do old-fashioned subtraction. 3 minus 0 is 3. 11 minus 6 is 5. Because 7 borrowed a 1. 7 minus 2 is 5. So W equals 5.53. There is nothing wrong doing the old-fashioned math. All right, one more problem with decimals. Drawing my t. All right, we got the v, we leave the v alone. We have minus 6.31, so we're going to add 6.31 to both sides. And, help my brain, I'm just going to put a 0 after 3.6. It doesn't change the value, but it makes everything line up nicely so I can add it easier. You don't need a calculator for this. All right, these cancel out because they're 0. V minus 0 equals, let's add. 0 plus 1 is 1. 6 plus 3 is 9. And 3 plus 6 is 9. V minus 0 is 9.91. V equals 9.91. Now, what I haven't shown you is a way to check this. You can check all of these. To check anything in algebra, you take the value of the variable and you plug it back in. So let's just pop back up here to number 2, to the w minus 4 equals 8. So let's do a check. W is 12 minus 4 equals 8. I always put my replacement value in parentheses because that shows me, oh yes, Mrs. Gates, I replaced a variable with a number. I replaced W with 12. So what's 12 minus 4? It's 8. 8 equals 8. And guys, I've done notes on later units, and by checking, I found a mistake. And I kept it in the notes because I want you to know checking is very, very good for you. All right, let's go to the next page. All right, now the last two topics we're going to do, we call them hot topics, are the additive property of equality with integers. Integers mean it's a whole number that can be positive or negative. So you need to be able to add and subtract with negative numbers. You've got to be able to do the negative numbers. All right. Does the algebraic process change? No. Same process. You're going to draw your T. Now, the V is happy on the left. It's going to stay on the left. I need to move the 5 because I need to get the variable, the letter, all by itself. So subtract 5 from both sides. They cancel out. 0 plus V equals -8 plus -5 is -13. Here are a few rules to remember. If you are adding two negatives, add the numbers and put a negative sign in front of them. You're simply moving further left, further down the number line, further in the negative territory. So if you're adding two negatives, which is -5 minus -8 minus 5, which is -8 plus -5, add them, slap a negative on them. Let's do number 2. Draw my T, Y's on the right. It's fine on the right. We don't mind. The opposite of a -4 is a +4. Again, you do it to both sides. Those cancel out. You have 6 equals 0 plus y. 6 equals y. Oh, I didn't write this one all nice and neat. All right. Oh, and on this one, I see that something did not transfer very well on the notes. So let me write the missing things. They'll be on your paper notes. Sorry about that, guys. Computers are our friends. They make our lives easier. Okay, so there you go. You have the additive property of equality with signed fractions. Lots more steps here, but it's still the same process. Alrighty. So step 1, I'm going to label the steps to make sure you do them. You can probably do steps in a different order, but this is my recommendation for you as you are learning, all right? I'm not going to mark it wrong if you get the answer right, but you do the steps in a different order. I want to make sure you understand how to do the process, all right? So let's do step 1. I'm going to I'm going to isolate the variable. So I'm going to move the 3/5. So my equation is now V equals 1/2 minus 3/5. But I can't subtract a fraction. Yeah, you can. You simply pick it up and you move it to the other side of the equation. Don't try to make things harder for yourselves. I didn't do any math, really. I simply moved it mathematically from one side of the equal sign to another. That's all I've done. So now I've got all the numbers on one side, the variable by itself. So step 2, find a common multiple for the denominator. And if you're not very good at factoring, when worst comes to worst, you simply multiply the denominators together and you will get a common denominator. So 2 times 5 equals 10. 10's the common denominator. Step 3, we're going to need more paper, by the way. Put fractions in common terms. Common terms mean they have the same denominator. When your fractions have the same denominator, you can add and subtract them. You can't do it when they have different denominators. They have to be speaking the same language. Alrighty, so I'm going to use this. I promise you won't need as much space on your work as I am for the notes because you're not going to be writing all these phrases down. So let me get this. All right, so 1/2 gets multiplied by 5 over 5 because 2 times 5 is 10, so the entire fraction gets multiplied by 5 over 5. Why 5 over 5? Because that's 1. 5 over 5 is another way of saying 1. So what I'm doing with 1/2, that fraction, I'm changing its name. I'm not changing the side. It's like taking a pizza and cutting it in half, and then cutting 1/2 of your pizza in a bunch of little pieces. It doesn't make that half a pizza bigger or smaller. It just changes its name. Alrighty. So 1/2, and then we've got minus 3 over 5. And what am I going to multiply that by, do you think? Right, 2 over 2, because 5 times 2 is 10. And let's get the V down there. So let's keep on going. V equals 5 over 10. But Mrs. Gates, how did I do that? Multiplying fractions is the easiest thing you will ever do with fractions. You multiply the numerators straight across. Do not cross multiply, straight across. You multiply the denominators, and that's it. Actually easy. The easiest thing you will ever do with fractions. So 5 over 10 minus 6 over 10, right? 3 times 2 is 6, 5 times 2 is 10. V equals negative 1 over 10. When you're doing the work, you won't have to write the step, find a common multiple. You won't have to put fractions in common terms. I tend to take a lot of specific separate steps because I want you to see how I do this. If you can condense your steps, go for it. But I want to make this as clear as possible. Alrighty, let's go to the second one. Y minus 7 over 8 equals, oh, I didn't quite get this right, equals negative 1/2. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, y minus 7 over 8 equals negative 1/2. Again, the printed notes you have will be good. Okay, do my little line, leaving my y alone, moving the negative 7 over 8 by adding the opposite. The opposite to a negative 7 over 8 is a positive 7 over 8. So I'm left with y equals negative 1/2 plus 7 over 8. Now this one is easier. How do you know it's easier, Mrs. Gates? Because I'm brilliant. No, it's easier because there is a common multiple between 2 and 8. It's 8. I can multiply 2 to get it up to 8. And what do I multiply 2 by? 4. So, y equals negative 1 over 2 times 4 over 4 plus 7 over 8. So we're doing the math. Y equals negative 4 over 8. 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. Plus 7/8. Y equals 3 over 8. Now, you can, if you want to, find the common denominator in step 1. You can if you want to. I'm not a big fan of it, but it's mathematically sound. I'm going to do this in yellow. Some people like to do that. They'll take y minus 7/8, they'll find the common denominator, and they'll end up doing y minus 7 over 8 equals negative 4 over 8. If you're comfortable doing that, go ahead and do that. Then you do the math, you add 7 over 8 to both sides, and you get y equals 3 over 8. You get the same answer. It's your choice. I recommend the way I've done it, but I'm not going to mark it wrong if you do it the other way. There are usually a couple of different ways to get there in math. Okay, that ends your first day of Unit 2. Go ahead and get to the work.